Recently, I finished playing through the entire Poppy Playtime series over on my Twitch, and afterwards we wanted to learn more about the world and the story of Poppy Playtime. So we decided to watch Game Theory's Poppy Playtime timeline video, and while yes, it is a bit outdated since it came out before Chapter 4's release, we still had a lot of fun with it and learned some new things about Poppy Playtime lore. If you are interested in seeing me play the games, edited versions will be uploaded on my main channel. But without further ado, let's get into it.
Poppy Playtime Chapter 4. It's been a whole year since the previous chapter, and in the meantime, Mob has done what they do best, giving out more lore than you can shake a mechanical arm at. But don't worry, loyal theorists, because I have played the spin-offs, I watched every trailer, I even read the book. Also, you...
There's a book? And there are spin-off games? I didn't even knew that. I played the main games, I didn't knew there were books and side games. The same thing happened to me when we watched the lore for Little Nightmares. I realized that there's a lot more than just the main games, because that also had like comics and mobile games and some side games that I have never heard of. Hashtag book talk. Are we going to open a Poppy Playtime book club? Next stream we are going to read together Poppy Playtime lore. And then we are going to sit here and discuss it.
You don't have to. Here is everything you need to know about the Poppy Playtime line.
Sure.
Hello Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's ready to take its relationship with Poppy to the next level. We got nothing. No new character, no new trailer, not even a release date. That's right, just like Scott was releasing games so fast Matt couldn't keep up, not 5 minutes before our recent theory dropped, Mob Entertainment released a new trailer with a new character and a release date. 5 minutes? Are you kidding me? I'm convinced Poppy wasn't brought to life for lore reasons. It was to troll me for all.
Yes, it would actually be fun though. I mean, sure. I'm not a big book reader. I mean, I do read books, but I don't think those are books that you can do a book club for, because they are more science books. I don't know if you can do book clubs for science. I guess that would just be called school. Is school just a book club for science books? Is that what school has been all along?
Eternity. I wouldn't be surprised if they did the same thing to us this week. Regardless, because of Mob's ridiculous and seemingly never-ending amount of content leading up to Chapter 4's release, it can be a little tricky to keep up with everything. We've had a book, 2 ARGs,
Is this the newest one? Or is this before Chapter 4 came out? 4 months ago? Because they talk about it as if it isn't out yet. Do they have a video where Chapter 4 is already included?
The giggle.
I'm sorry that we have to do this now, but I think I selected the wrong video. There are other videos that came out since, but I don't think they are about the timeline. They seem to go into specific parts of the story, so I guess we are going to watch this video. I'm always prepared for everything. I knew exactly which video was best to watch.
And over a dozen teasers and videos. But if you're someone that's only played the games, or you just haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then there's been a whole year worth of story that you would have no idea about going into Chapter 4. So today, I'm going to give you all a hand and fill you in from the beginning with all the important names, dates, and lore Mob has given us, as well as a few theories of our own for good measure, all in one cohesive timeline. Now, this is a big task.
Ari is the
so
most
instead of
prepared
doing
video
this
by
like
now.
our
I'm
usual
always
theories,
prepared.
I wanted to try treating this like our
I've never been unprepared. It's not like we had to, you know, change the game for one stream because I installed wrong or something like that. No, I have never been unprepared for a stream. That would never happen.
NAF timeline. It's more story focused, with references in the bottom corner showing thumbnails, books, titles, basically any citations that I'll be pulling from. I've also got this nifty little traffic light symbol in the top corner to clear things up. Green means what I'm saying are facts that we have physical evidence for. Amber means what I'm saying is theory, but it's supported by...
And that's why we usually have an ad blocker. Thanks YouTube for showing me what we are talking about earlier. Why ad blockers are so convenient. Now they suddenly decided that apparently YouTube is so poor that they need the bit of extra ad revenue.
And red means it's speculation that makes sense for the story, but we don't have a lot of evidence for. So keep a close eye on your screens, theorists. It's time to analyze the history of this forgotten factory. Just be careful that the screen doesn't stare back. Playtime Co. was founded in the good old US of A in 1930. Quickly, it became one of the most well-renowned toy companies in the world, priding itself in making toys locally instead of overseas like its competitor Mattel. Yes, that Mattel, the ones who made Barbie.
I know exactly where you're going with this, and I have to say, I really resent it.
All of this success was thanks to one man, the founder of Playtime Co., Elliot Ludwig. All he wanted was to bring joy to children. But sadly, that noble goal meant that he spent all of his time at work, neglecting his own family, and his wife had had enough, divorcing him that same year. Nevertheless, Elliot pushed forward, though for 2 decades, he struggled to figure out the key to innovating the toy-making world, until finally he hit a breakthrough.
Jesus. You gotta be kidding me. Okay, let me see. Maybe I can turn the ad blocker on for this video. Maybe it works. Because if that's the amount of ads we are going to get, then this is going to take a long time.
In 1950, Elliot created a toy that would change the world forever. Poppy Playtime.
A little girl can talk to her. Poppy gives her answers. She is the first doll actually able to have a conversation with a child.
Not only that, but her hair also smelled like poppies, which had been used throughout history to help children fall asleep, making her an instant hit with the parents.
Okay, which I thought was very interesting, because the only thing I knew about poppies was that they were part of some kind of drug. So when they said, it smells like poppy, I was like, okay, and parents are just fine with that? But apparently they were.
How did Elliot achieve this incredible feat? Well, because Poppy wasn't just a plastic toy. Elliot used organic parts to make her, allowing Poppy to really seem alive. He just needed to add a quick no-refund policy to anyone who tried to fix the Poppy doll themselves, just to keep it under wraps.
I think that wouldn't stop
no one
people.
ever discovers this little secret of Elliot's. But Poppy sales alone can't keep the toy company afloat. So they release a handful of new toys, like Bron the Dinosaur in 1961, or Boxy Boo in 1966, though none of them really compare to Poppy in terms of popularity. But then, out of nowhere, tragedy struck. Since day one, Elliot had been encouraging his employees to adopt, to bring joy to children who had none of their own. And he lived by example, adopting
the orphans underground.
Finally, the family that the family man had always wanted, until she passed away before his very eyes. There was nothing he could do to save her. All Elliot could do was take the biological knowledge he had.
I mean, we knew that far. I thought that the toys that were made with human parts only started after that, but apparently they already started before that with the human experimentation. I thought that Poppy was his daughter and that was the first experiment they did, but apparently not. At least not according to this theory.
And turn her into another organic Poppy doll, just so he could keep a part of her with him forever, so part of her could live on. Little did he know how successful that experiment would be. Somehow, his daughter's mind managed to survive the process. Naturally, Elliot is shocked by this. His daughter is back, living on inside this doll that he made. He couldn't let her fall out of his grasp again, so he builds a family home inside the factory storage bay and locks her inside a glass case to keep her safe. He even adds a passage leading directly to his office so he can visit her whenever he or she wants. With his family now returned to him, his passion to
Okay, I think this is where they don't have the newest information, because we know that Poppy already managed to escape from that glass box and that she was downstairs and the prototype trapped her in there. So maybe that was the place where she was trapped before that, but she did manage to break out and got captured by the prototype and put in there. Which our theory last time after we played is that Elliot Ludwig is the prototype, so maybe he just put her back. And he already put her there before before the whole factory went downhill.
Drive for innovation was restored.
But with so much ambition, he rose back up and continued to fulfill his vision for the Playtime Co. toy factory.
The first thing he needed was more people like him. Smart, capable people that could help him continue to innovate and answer the toughest questions the world had to offer. Like, say, how was a child able to live on inside a doll, perhaps? But older minds are harder to shape. He needed people who still had some of that childlike wonder, and thus the Young Geniuses program was born. Elliot sent out flyers and posters similar to that of the time period, trying to gather young minds together to turn them into the scientists of the future, stamped with the logo he'd been using for Playtime since the early days. This attracted many
So I'm
young
assuming
and
that
bright
is where the Doctor came here. I assume that's where this is going. Because we know him.
individuals, including a brilliant, albeit slightly cold young man named Harley Sawyer. Harley was a peculiar character. He didn't care for his comrades.
That's a word to use.
But one thing he clearly loved was science, and Elliot took a liking to this strange boy. He may not have been normal, but neither was Elliot.
Child labor,
he saw part
yeah.
of himself in Harley. This was the kind of kid he could take under his wing, mold into someone who could really shape the future, and maybe even catapult Playtime into the stratosphere of success. Unfortunately, that didn't quite work out. Harley
not really.
never lost his distaste for others, and while he continued to pursue innovation, he was just doing so to push the boundaries of what could be done, not to help humanity like Elliot envisioned. That being said, Elliot didn't give up. He kept trying to change Harley's point of view, but no matter how hard he tried...
That is what we also talked about in chapter 4, that they probably forgot the goal of maybe we can help people with this and actually just went to how far can we go? What else can we do? And it was more about the can we do that and not why are we even doing it.
It was no use. Harley could not change. Not here anyway. And so Elliot makes the hard decision to kick Harley out of the program, sending him home to the outside world to be around more people, hoping it will help him to understand why they do what they do.
No, it didn't.
Was destroyed
Spoiler
by this
alert,
news.
it
His
didn't.
hero, Elliot Ludwig, was abandoning him. All he could see Elliot as was soft, pathetic, and short-sighted, backstabbing him because he was too much of a genius for Elliot to understand. Though it didn't matter now. He had to do what he was told, and so Harley left the program, disappearing from the halls of Playtime Co. At least for now. Foreshadowing.
Ooh, I wonder what happens later. Not like we
As the
already
years go
know.
by, more and more, Elliot feels like it's not really enough to just encourage his employees to adopt. There are still so many children that need a home, much like his own daughter did. And while the Young Geniuses program
So
was
just
good
turn them
by
into
taking
monsters.
on young people so late
You
in
know?
their childhoods, even they were already stuck in their ways like Harley was.
Main character
so in
moment.
1976, Elliot announces a new program, Playcare, Playtime's own on-site orphanage, where he can continue to bring joy to children and educate them in the ways they should go, creating a mass of young, brilliant minds that could help lead the world to prosperity. But while all those programs sound good on paper, and they were well received by the public, they were beginning to cost Elliot a lot of money. Poppy was the last big financial success, and that was over 2 decades ago. But he
I still think it's an interesting idea that no one, or that the public said, yeah, that's a good idea, when someone came to them and said, I want to build an orphanage far underground where no one can just come in and check up on what we are actually doing. I think if some billionaire today would say, I'm going to build an orphanage, everyone would say, hey, good idea. And then he says, far underground. Everyone would say, what? Why? Why does it have to be ever heard of sunlight that is kind of important for people? Shouldn't these children, experience nature and maybe know what it's like to be outside and not live in a cave underground, no matter how good you design it? They still need sunlight and stuff like that,
He can't keep innovating in the toy world and run these programs on his own. He would need more staff. So he hires people like Stella Graber to run the Playcare, Leith Pierre as head of innovation, Eddie M.N. Ritterman as the head of research, and
Yes,
Jimmy
we know
Roth
them.
as the chief marketing officer.
And we all hate Eddie. That is what we learned. We don't like Eddie. Those kids would end up both pale and ghost and brain rotted. Right, you know how big vitamin D inefficiency would be in these children? It's already pretty big, like in normal society, you know? That is already something many people have. Having them grow up underground will just increase that.
Their first assignment, figure out how to stop the company from feeling, quote, old-fashioned. With all their powers combined, they try to get the company back on top, starting with the release of brand new
Okay, the thing is, we know these people. Stella was the woman that talked about that compared people to trees in her job interview, and later we found how she got promoted into the experiment side of the factory. We found the tape for that. Then Ritterman was I can't remember I know we know about Ritterman, but I don't remember where we heard of him. Was that the guy who was talking to the construction worker and threatened him with pushing him over the edge? I think that was Ritterman. And then Leith Pierre's the guy we met, is from the very first tape, is when we meet him the first time, where he talks about the security measures of the factory. But I don't know who this guy is. Because apparently there's a tape where you can see him, because it's the only person where they have actual footage of, but I can't remember where we saw him. I don't know who this guy is.
toys like Candy Cat in 1979.
1980s.
They continue to release toys into the next decade. They try swap-em-alls that you could mix and match like Cappy and PJ Puggett.
Why does it look like the IR guy is blushing so much? What? Oh, now I see what you mean. Yeah. I think it's because his face is very red in this screenshot. Especially compared to the drawings of the other people. He is very red.
On top, starting with the release of brand new toys like Candy Cat in 1980 and PJ Puggett. They also try Kick Me Paul for some reason, but nothing could quite match the success of Ellie.
Can we get Kick Me Paul as an enemy in the next chapter? I want like a small enemy that comes running towards you and you have to react and kick him away. I want that boss fight. That boss fight seems fun. Please add him in chapter 5. That just seems like the funniest boss fight ever, where you just, you have this tortured kid soul in some kind of ball and you just kick that ball around. Kick me what? Kick me Paul. I don't know why they don't just sell a normal ball. I don't know why they had to give him limbs and a face. Maybe children are like, oh, this looks like it's alive. Now it's even more fun to kick it. Children are little psychopaths after all.
Its original Poppy. That was until 1984, when Elliot had another idea. He went to the team, and shortly after, he releases the Blue Boy himself.
There he is, Huggy Wuggy. It only took him 34 years to come up with a new toy.
Looking up, Huggy is such a big hit with the kids, it basically becomes the face of the brand. In the eyes of the public, Poppy was a long-forgotten memory. Long live Huggy! Of course, he has to capitalize off of this success by releasing Huggy's pink counterpart.
And as we know, he still lives. Huggy survived, and he's back in the next chapter, and I'm really looking forward to him. And we sadly don't know what became of Kissy Missy, but I think she will also be alive. Kissy Missy had this game just has been rough for Kissy since the moment she met us. You know, when she meets us the first time, she's completely fine. Then at the end of chapter 3, she gets completely destroyed by, I think, the prototype. And when we see her the next time, she's cut up, her arm is broken, half her face is burned away. And then at the end of chapter 4, we also rip off her arm. Kissy Missy just had a rough time since she met us. I heard some kids enjoy kicking cats. Yes, and I think we should just kick these kids, to be honest. If I see a kid kick my cat, I'm going to kick the kid. I guarantee you that. Huggy's kind of cute if you ignore the face. Right, if you ignore the big teeth and that he has multiple rows of teeth, he's kind of adorable. And he looks very huggable. That you know, it was very hard to resist running into him and giving him a hug while he was chasing you.
Part Kissy Missy 1 year later. She too is a huge success, just not as big as Huggy, obviously. Playtime Co. is on top of the world at this point. It's almost like they can do no wrong. But sadly, over the next half of the decade, their profits once again decrease. Sure, Huggy was successful, but just like Poppy before, you can't sustain an entire company off of a single toy, even if he has a cute pink girlfriend. They needed something new, and one of them had an idea. What if you create a bunch of toys as part of a set? That way kids aren't buying just
and
one
they
toy,
even
but
got
several.
a cartoon.
Enter the Smiling Critters in 1918.
I wonder why he's called Huggy when he looks so huggable. That's a good question. I wonder why. Maybe we should get a science team to figure that one out.
Similar to Care Bears or Cabbage Patch Kids, these are small cuddly toys with big personalities. But
These ones, on the other hand, they just look like demons. Imagine you wake up as a child in the middle of the night and that is looking into your face because it's sleeping next to you. That is terrifying. They're from Poppy Playtime. These 5, yeah, the smiling critters. I mean, look at them. Those smiles are way too big. The eyes are way too dark and empty. These toys just look terrifying. And then they have these speakers in their mouth, which I think catnaps, at least the catnap toy could like squirt some water out of that. Or I think it was the red gas that came out of its mouth. Which is, if okay, if I were a parent in this world, right? And I saw a toy and the box says, oh yeah, pull on the tail and it shoots gas into your child's face, I would stay far away from that toy. I wouldn't buy that. That doesn't sound like a good idea. Especially if they tell you, yeah, and that gas just helps your child sleep. You know, if your child has problems sleeping, you should see a doctor and not go to a child company a toy company to fix that problem. That is not the place where you want to go with sleeping problems, you know? You don't want to take some gas from a random company. You should go to a doctor with that. Why did they make them look like that for kids? Right, I don't think these look like a toy that I would buy a child. And I also don't know why they have to have these big grins. You know, they could be smaller. They could look more adorable. They don't have to be demons.
Each one is unique, and so you would need to collect them all for the full experience. This was the perfect way
collect
to increase
items.
the dropping sales numbers Playtime was facing. Plus, to really capture the same appeal as Poppy and her poppy-scented hair, these critters would each come with their own unique scents, all with calming effects. Crafty Corn smells like jasmine, Bobby Bear Hug like rose. But would calming be enough? Poppy's hair literally put children to sleep. That's what made her such a hit
Which
with
is
the parents
still
in
a
the
very
50s.
big
They
red
needed
flag.
these smiling critters to do the same. So they get to work developing one more smiling critter. One with the advertised scent of lavender, a scent associated with sleep, but instead of actually using lavender, they would...
I mean, even if you can be sure that the poppy smell is not dangerous to your kid, it's still making them kind of addicted to that. If every time they go to sleep for, I don't know, the first 20 years of their life, they smell the hair of the poppy flower and that helps them fall asleep. As soon as they don't have that doll anymore, they will have sleep problems because their body has become so dependent on that smell to sleep, on that poppy addition to put them to sleep. So it's you just make your children addicted to that. Aren't poppies poisonous? I think I don't remember. I think part of them is poisonous, and I know that also part of them gets used in opium, so it is something that is used to put you to sleep or to numb you, and is also used, I think in other drugs. I'm not sure, but at least in opium, you use poppy. So, it's already not something that I would put anywhere near my children. You basically just help them ease into an opium addiction when they grow up. Because you already made them dependent on one of the ingredients.
Create a poppy gas that would actively put kids to sleep, just like Poppy did. They put the smoke inside the purple cat and gave him a name that...
And that, even if you go with the smells like poppy to put them to sleep, okay. But to literally say this toy shoots gas into your child's face and then that gas knocks your child out, that is wild to do that as a parent. To say, I don't see a problem with that. That seems normal. We should do that.
tied into his sleepy powers, catnap. And just to be on the safe side, Playtime Co. also commissions the creation of a Saturday morning cartoon featuring this new cast of characters, all begging cat...
Which also was terrifying. If that is actually how the cartoon looks, that wouldn't help with sales. That would just decrease the sales, because that cartoon was also very terrifying for children. I mean, just look at the frame we have on screen right now. It didn't look like something that children should watch in the morning.
Now, to help them fall to sleep with his red smoke, showing kids and parents alike that this is just what the toy is.
I think this has a bit of a feeling of the cartoon had a bit of the feeling that you get when you watch Smiling Tree Friends. Is that what it's called? Also, this cartoon with the adorable animals that just die brutally in the end. It kind of had that feeling without the mutilation. But everything else, the creepy atmosphere, the horror aspect, that was all there.
Meant to do. Initially, everything is going according to plan. Sales for this new line of toys are great. They are flying off the shelves. Both parents and kids really seem to love these new adorable critters, except for catnap. After a few weeks, doctors began reporting a rise in children suffering from intense nightmares that all started after they received their catnap toys. In Playtime's desperation to mimic the sleep-inducing effects that Poppy had, they'd accidentally concocted something that, yes, put children to sleep, but also gave children horrible nightmares. Thankfully for Leith and the team, no connection was ever proven, but they still needed to save
Who could have seen that coming?
All of the catnap toys, and catnap was removed from the Smiling Critters lineup entirely. The Smiling Critters disaster put Playtime Co. in a bad spot. If they were going to survive the next decade, something needed to be done and fast. And so, Leith Pierre put his head of innovation status to good use and came up with an unusual but effective plan. He hired a private investigator, Jared Lockhart, to track down former members of the Young Geniuses program that Elliot had started decades ago.
Okay,
These
I don't
people
know.
trained under
I don't know if we heard that name before. Maybe he's from the books, because that name doesn't ring a bell for me.
Elliot. They were geniuses from a young age, and most of them had quite impressive careers. If anyone was going to be able to come up with an idea to save this company, it would be one of them. Sometime later, Jared arrives with the list, and when it lands on Leith's desk, there is one option that immediately catches his eye.
He is
Harley
back.
Sawyer.
Oh, boys, I'm back!
This guy was now certified by the American Board of Neurological Surgery. He was,
Damn.
by all accounts, a genius. And with Elliot using biological parts to make Poppy, a surgeon felt like the perfect fit. Leith presents this idea to Elliot for final approval. And while Elliot is hesitant at first, he does remember that Harley was
That is an interesting way to fix your public image. You know, you just had a big scandal with the poppy gas, and your next big move is to employ a surgeon. Why? Why would people not be suspicious of that? Okay, maybe they disguise it as, oh yeah, he's going to make sure that something like that doesn't happen again, that he's going to run tests and he's a smart guy and he can, you know, prevent something like that from happening. But a surgeon is maybe not the right profession for that. Guess who's back? Back again. It's Tom Sawyer, the doctor.
the brightest of the bunch back in the day, and maybe all these years away have taught him the lessons he was hoping he'd learn. Do it. With that approval, Leith reaches out to Harley on January 15th, 1990, giving him an offer to come and join Playtime Co. once again. And strangely, despite the hurt Elliot caused him all those years ago, for some reason, Harley accepts the offer. Immediately, he begins showing the level of promise they were hoping for from this recruit. He sees the problems at Playtime Co., the public outcry, the declining profits, and he came up with an idea that would fix everything.
Giant toys. We can increase our workforce and simultaneously decrease the number of lawsuits and people on our payroll if the people we have working aren't people. Put me in charge of it, and I will save this company.
Leith makes Harley.
I know this is like, we know he's evil, but when someone talks like that, I would not trust him. He just sounds evil.
Head of special projects, and together they begin hiring other scientists to help with the development of the Bigger Bodies Initiative. Some of them are fellow Young Genius alumni like Dr. Bruno White and Dr. Carmine McKay, but others are just young and eager biologists looking for their first big break, like the owner of the Orientation Notebook.
He seems trustworthy. Yeah, he seems like a nice guy, right?
Harley takes the new scientists
no
to
red
observe
flags
and
there.
study the Poppy doll that he remembered being in the storage bay from his days in the Young Geniuses program. He told them to use her as the blueprint to bring toys to life.
I am the cause. Being able to exist as a doll, it has killed so many people.
Everyone works diligently to try.
Oh, so up to this point they used biological parts in the toys, but they have not yet started using the children. Okay, I thought that already happened, but apparently they only start now with that. Okay. So up until this point, they used the biological parts from something else, maybe from animals. And now they are only starting to do it with people. Okay. I mean, that is a wild thing if you have someone who like that, like Sawyer coming in, talking like that and being like, yes, why don't we just skip this whole animal part and we take the children we already have here and put them into the toys. And no one sat in that board meeting and was like, what? We should do what? No. They all sat there and were like, oh, that is a good idea. We already have the children. you know, that's going to save so much money. We don't have to buy animals anymore because we already have the children. And we get them for free. They are orphans.
And recreate the magic of this one Poppy doll. But after 814 experiments, it's clear that things aren't working with simple rats. They need to try something bigger. They need to repeat what Elliot did. They need to use children. Harley delivers the note to Elliot as one of his many updates on the program. But once again, Elliot is torn. Up until this point, these experiments weren't really all that bad. It was just a few hundred rats that suffered the consequences. But now, he had a choice to
poor
make.
rats.
He'd spent his life trying to bring joy to children, to give them a home, somewhere they could grow and overcome the odds. Harley still couldn't believe this soft old man. What is more important to you, these children or the business you've spent decades building, which people rely on for their own families? Mortality is just a curse on humanity anyway. If we can figure this out, all these orphans who had suffered would never grow old or sick. They could live.
Oops. That was my PC, don't worry.
Forever and keep bringing joy.
As he, oh god, that smile as he hands the papers. Right, if he came in with that smile on his face when he gave him the papers, that would be the point where he should have said no. Before he even read the papers. If he came in with that smile, he should have just said, nah, nah, we're not going to do that. But also, that's, you know, the thing is, I want to say, if someone comes in and says, what do you think is more important? The lives of these children or your company? My first thought was, okay, obviously, a normal person would say the children and this is just a game, but then I thought about it and I'm like, nah, I think there are enough people in the real world who would also choose their company. And that is the sad part of this game, that it is not that unrealistic that someone would pick their company over the lives of many children.
To other children for centuries to come. It was not an easy decision, but this argument from Harley does sway Elliot. With that permission in hand, the senior staff of Playtime Co. set about building the Game Station, a facility designed to test the orphans' physical and mental abilities, pairing them with a specific toy, and if they were deemed ready, taken away for conversion.
They'd come for games and never come back.
As part of this process, they utilized the red smoke that they made for the catnap toy. Where previously Poppy gels had failed, gas is a much more effective way of getting the mystical powers of the poppy flower that helped bring Poppy to life into the bodies of these orphans. They install shower heads throughout the playcare to distribute.
Oh, so the so the poppy gas is the reason why they become alive. That is part of that. I thought that was just something they used to put them to sleep. But that is part of the conversion into toys, okay.
The gas. But it wasn't the most effective solution. Kids could see them and what they were doing. They became wary of going to bed. An alternate solution would need to be found. However, they had
this study looked like the infos. Right, when he said there were shower heads everywhere, and then he showed that, I also was like, oh, that looks like something we all know. That wasn't a good time when it was used the last time in history. Probably not a good thing here.
Other problems to deal with. Over the last few years, there had been one employee that had been causing Playtime Co. a lot of trouble. They weren't ruining their plans as such, they were just a bit of an administrative headache. That man was Rich Lovitz. Initially, he was working in the storage room and he said to be on board with the general Playtime mission, appreciating the good this company did for the orphans. Sadly though, Rich had a habit of losing his temper with management, and so he was demoted to
Rich
the
is our
rejected
boy.
toy room, which, as you might imagine, he took really well.
After years of being ignored, the company actually heard all my complaints. I guess my words must have really inspired them to take action, because the next day I got demoted down here to the freaking island of misfit toys!
A Of course, Playtime Co. had to demote him again, putting him to work in construction in the caves beneath the factory. Down here, in relative solitude, he was able to recognize his shortcomings and, with the help of his new supervisor, began to improve, even to the point of getting promoted. At first, this seemed great for Playtime Co. A reformed employee. The system worked.
He became the head of shipping, I believe. I was about to say he seems chill, and then they said he has issues with his temper. Yeah, he had a bit issues with his temper, but in the last tape where we see him, he is the head of shipment and he helps another employee. So he is a good guy. You know, we like Rich here. Our theory at the end of chapter 4, which I don't think they are going to get into because I don't think they would get that far where Rich is like a bit relaxed and a bit more level-headed. At the end of the game, we said it would be interesting if we are Rich, that is the character we play, because he has been at odds with the company from pretty much the first chapter, from the first tape we find of him. He's already at odds with the company, and he seems to, when we find the last tape where he is helping the other employee and is talking to him, where he is the head of shipment, he also still talks about the company like he's not trusting them. Like he knows there's a lot going wrong in the company. So the theory we had at the end is that maybe we are Rich. Because we don't know what happened to him as of now. We don't know what happened to him during the Hour of Joy. We just know that he became the head of shipment, and that's the last we know of him. And I think that would be interesting if we are Rich, because his story continued throughout all the games. In every game you find a tape where it explains where he went and what his story is. So this is one of the characters who is clearly not involved with the evil side of the company, but still is so important that we meet him every chapter. So the only thing that I would say who this could be is that we are Rich. That is the reason why he is so important. That we have to follow his story.
That was until Rich continued being promoted and began learning what was really going on with the orphans. He cared for these kids. That was the one good thing he had going for him from the beginning. And so he begins flying off the handle once again. The problem was now.
That's in one tape he gets angry about how they treat the orphans. I think I remember that. That he says something about that it doesn't suit him, how that the orphans live down there and don't see daylight or something like that. I think there was something like that about him. So he was so that is what I think happened with Rich, that he was promoted, he learned too much, he left the company before they found out he knew all that, so he left, and then the Hour of Joy happened, and then we are Rich, who returns much later.
Now he knew too much. He could actually cause a problem for Playtime Co. if he went to the authorities. They couldn't just fire him anymore. They needed to get rid of him. And with the Bigger Bodies initiative well underway, as well as Harley's requests for bigger subjects,
where I saw his story go.
They took Rich and used him as a guinea pig, turning him into the first semi-successful experiment 1006, which they dubbed the prototype. Not a toy as such, more.
Okay, I would say that is wrong. Because at the very end of chapter 4, the last cutscene, the prototype tells Poppy that we are something that can't be burned away. So that they have a special connection to each other, which we said is that the prototype is Elliot Ludwig and he is Poppy's father, and that is this connection that can't be burned away. But they don't know that when they made this video, because this video came out before chapter 4. So we said that Elliot Ludwig is the prototype. And I think that is kind of the only character that I can see as the prototype because of that last dialogue, where he tells Poppy what we are can't be burned away, which in my opinion just means we are family that can't be burned away. And I don't think why any other character would say that. So I don't think that the prototype is rich. I don't think that's the case. But it's an interesting theory. And before Chapter 4 dropped, I can see how they got to that conclusion. But I don't think that is rich.
A mix of mechanical and biological parts. It lacked the ability to speak, but was able to mimic voices of others to communicate.
Which is really cool.
Was finally seeing success.
I really loved the last dialogue with the prototype where he switches between voices, which the best part of that is that you can hear the voices of other characters. He switches to the voice of the Doctor, he switches to the voice of Stella, which I thought was so cool that he switches between these voices, but that you also hear where these voices come from, where he learned these voices that he mimicked, from which people they came. That was really cool.
And removing a problem at the same time. But Rich, now
World of fun, yay.
1006, wouldn't forget what had been done to him, nor what they were doing to the orphans. He just needed to bide his time and wait for the right moment to strike. Playtime Co. continued their development of the bigger bodies, but they struggled to find the success they'd had with.
Imagine how much fun were the voice actors. I think the way they resolved that is that every voice actor records all lines for the prototype, and then they just cut it up and use it like changingly. but it sounds really cool. That's why, maybe because they said that Elliot Ludwig agreed to the Bigger Bodies project. What I think maybe happened is that he disagreed and that they turned him into the prototype to get him out of the way. That is what I think. Because there is, in Chapter 3, there is a sequence where we hear a radio broadcast where they talk about that Elliot Ludwig is dead, that they found him dead, and that they also found a dead child in his house. And my thought is that they turned him into the prototype, and then they planted that body to paint him in a bad light so that people wouldn't look too much into his death, because his public image has been damaged so much that people don't care that he's dead. I think that they maybe did that to get people away, that people don't look too much into his death, and that they turned him into the prototype.
1006, usually unable to reactivate their brains after surgery. That is when Harley decided to try something different. He decided to make the bigger body physically bigger, rather than just trying to match the size of the test subject. It flew in the face of all logic, but he needed to try something, and the crazy part is, it worked. They created Experiment 1160, Boxy Boo, and this discovery opened up a new world.
I think we only heard about Boxy Boo. I don't think at least in the main games, he is not a character. We hear about him, though. I think there's a scene where some cleanup team is cleaning up corpses, and they say something about feeding them to Boxy. So I guess Boxy Boo became their trash for corpses they needed to get rid of. He's cute. Yeah, he looks kind of adorable, but I can also see how he would work in a horror game where you walk past this box and he just comes jumping out of the box and grabs you, which would be terrifying. Because there were a lot of these boxes lying around, especially in the storage area. I remember these boxes. Didn't knew there was a monster inside of them that could have just jumped out and eaten me at any point.
Of possibilities for the.
Maybe he is in Chapter 5. That would be interesting, because I think the idea of like a jump. What are they called? Are they called jumping? No, they are not called jumping jacks. What are these things? Jack in the Box. That's what I call it. An enemy who is like a Jack in the Box creature seems really interesting. That they are just a box that you maybe you walk through a passage multiple times, and sometimes he's just sitting there as a box, and you have to remember how it looked so that you recognize when there's suddenly a box that is not supposed to be there. And when you don't recognize that and walk past him, he just jumps out and eats you, so that you have to pay attention to your environment. I think that would be really cool.
Future. At this point, several orphans are showing promise in the game station. Although there was one that caught Harley's attention specifically, Quinn Navidson. He was a pretty average kid, except he had a strange obsession with removing the heads off of all of his toys. However, Harley didn't see this disposition as a weakness. It was something he could take advantage of, manipulate to get his scores higher, and make
that
him
seems
a more
on brand for Harley.
body down the road. Harley spends some one-on-one time with Quinn.
God, I would die immediately. Me too. If there would suddenly just jump a monster out of the box, that would be terrifying. But I still think it would be a cool enemy to face. That you have to walk through this area and have to do different stuff in there, and you have to recognize when there's suddenly a box that is not supposed to be there. I think that would be really cool.
Convincing him that he understands Quinn better than most, and asking him to just simply apply himself at the next assessment. And next time, Quinn's scores did improve in most areas, although his intelligence seemed to wane a bit, but not enough to stop the inevitable. In August 1990, Quinn became Experiment 1166. Yarnaby. He was strong, agile, swift, but his intelligence still wasn't where Harley wanted it. He saw him more like a dog, which, while not ideal, could be useful for protection. The more bigger bodies they
that document was how he talked about knowing that there's a child in that toy, and the way he talked about that toy was very disgusting to read. We was talking about, oh yeah, this weird creature, but it is kind of adorable how it sits in the corner and whimpers. And I was like, what? This man is an interesting character, Harley Sawyer. Which is still why I hope that he comes back, because the boss fight against Harley was a bit disappointing in my opinion. It felt very rushed, like they wanted to get the game out and didn't put enough time into it, which was sad, because he was built up so cool as this big bad, the doctor who has been experimenting on all of these children and has now complete control over the factory because he's literally in the system of the factory. And then his boss fight was just run through the dark and hope you don't get caught. That was a bit disappointing. Oh, that's the thing my best friend talked about. She thinks it's very cute and it's her favorite. Yarnaby. Yarnaby is very cute. I think he looked adorable. But he also was very terrifying, because there was this big area where you had to reroute electricity, but he has very good hearing, so whenever you use one of the levers or turn on electricity, he hears that and comes running towards you. That was the hardest part, and I think it was one of my favorite boss fights so far, because you had to really move... really had to think about how you move, where you go. You had to pay attention to where he is and stuff like that. That was probably my favorite boss fight so far. Because some of the boss fights are just, if you run, the monster can't get you, and you can do the stuff you have to do while you are running around. And that is not that cool in a horror sense. That is cool in because it's very intense. And you kind of, if you make one mistake, you are dead. But in a horror sense, I think Yarnaby was one of the coolest boss fights, where you really had to pay attention and listen to where he is and move with strategy and not just run around like a maniac.
The more things there were that could kill him and stop his progress. So Harley isolated Yarnaby,
like that,
making Yarnaby loyal,
jumping out of the box.
Around that same time, another orphan named Theodore Granville began causing some mischief in the playcare, breaking into rooms, stealing files,
the name
even stealing
seems
a
familiar.
grab pack. When questioned about it, he just said it was his friend that told him to do those things. The staff just assume this friend is of the imaginary persuasion, but in reality, it was very, very real. 1006 had found a way out of containment.
God, that's worse than the last boss fight in Pikmin 3, which, to be honest, is the most annoying boss fight I've done. I don't like, I don't play much video games. Yeah, I think it was definitely one of the harder boss fights, Yarnaby, because you actually had to think about what you do. But I think that's that was a lot better than the Doctor. Because the Doctor was just, you needed 5 batteries. They are somewhere in this dark room, but there are also robots in the dark rooms that are controlled by the Doctor. And if they see you, they are going to run after you. Even if you sneak past them, they are going to see you and run after you. So what you had to do is just run, dodge them if they are in front of you, run past them, grab the battery, run through the dark, put the battery in, run for the next one. And that was a bit boring in my opinion. It was not easy, it was still a hard boss fight. I think I died 3 or 4 times, but it wasn't very interesting because a lot of it came down to luck, that one of the robots just, when it was reaching for you, didn't hit you. A lot of it just came down to luck, and that was a bit boring in my opinion. But Yarnaby was a cool boss fight. That one was interesting because you not only had to hear where he is and what he's doing and had to think about where to go next, you also had to look where the cables you are currently activating go, and you had to activate the right ones and reroute the power to where you needed it to open certain doors and stuff like that.
And was using Theo to help them escape. Once it had all the information, 1006 and Theo made a break for it. Though, due to Theo's inexperience, he accidentally overcharges the electrified grab pack hand and electrocutes himself. At this moment, 1006 has a choice.
Rip
Gain
Theo.
the freedom it wants or save Theo. It chooses the latter. It gives Theo
not
over to the
Rip Theo.
Playtime Co scientists and turns itself in to be locked away once again. Now, there is only one way the scientists are able to save Theo.
So wait, that's the influence field BBC. Okay, so that is confirmed that Theo tried to escape and electrocuted himself, and he tried to escape with the prototype. Okay.
Be locked away once again. Now, there is only one way the
Muscular pretty boy.
scientists are able to save Theo. And on November 11th, 1990, the bigger body Catnap was born. Experiment 118.
Catnap is probably the worst enemy because he's just lurking in the dark all the time, and you just see him somewhere in the dark as he's staring at you, and you just see the glowing eyes, and you can just make out the smile from the darkness. Catnap was terrifying. And then when you fight him, he also gives you hallucinations with his gas, and he looks even worse.
88. He was put into the play care because he was able to release the red gas just like the toy. And the kids would, hopefully, be much less suspicious of this big friendly toy than a typical shower
because
head.
he
Again,
looks
Playtime Co. was killing 2 birds
trustworthy.
with 1 stone. The Bigger Bodies initiative was now in full swing. Between Catnap and Yarnaby, Huggy was created. And in 1991, he was put to work as Playtime Co.'s new security measure. Though his wandering eyes were noticed by an employee who wasn't supposed to know anything. Rowan Stoll. Rowan wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on, and over the course of a few months, began to figure out exactly what Playtime Co. was doing. When he threatened to leak what he'd found to the public, Harley put his bigger bodies to good use.
Now, we need to start tailoring that appetite of yours to flesh. Get me an update on the situation with Rowan Stoll.
Okay,
That same year,
I don't think
another
we
orphan,
found
Marie Payne, began
that tape. Oh yes, I would trust that thing 100%. Yeah, sure. Imagine you are a child and you are told to get to sleep, and you walk into the dark bedroom, which the bedrooms in itself, you can see them here in the backgrounds, are just rows with beds where they sleep in this big room. And in the middle of this just sits Catnap with his wide grin and smiles at you with glowing eyes. I think every child would love to sleep there. I don't see how any child would find that creepy or off-putting or get nightmares from that. Hey, Chrissy the Fox, welcome. How are you? Welcome back. I don't see how that would be terrifying to a child, you know? Especially if they have to go to sleep. I mean, the gas would put them to sleep, but I don't think they had a nice sleep after seeing that.
suffering from unwakeable nightmares thanks to catnap's gas,
Yeah,
leading to the
there we
latest
go.
experiment we know of to date. Experiment 1222, Mummy Longlegs. She was violent towards the staff, but kind towards the kids, making her the perfect guardian for the game station. And by May of 1990,
The critters made no sense as a design. Why are they so creepy from like the base? Right, that we talked about that earlier when they were talking about the smiling critters. They don't look like a toy I would buy for a child. They look terrifying. Because their smile is way too big. Their smile is so big, it disforms their face. You know, it has this uncanny smile. And then they have also these big dark eyes, which just looks terrifying. You kind of match Catnap a bit. Oh, you mean because of the color? I thought my smile is not that big. I mean, imagine every time my model smiles, it would just disfigure my face so that the smile would fit on it. That's terrifying. Well, I guess you can say that's why they went bankrupt. I think the problem was Catnap, just Catnap, because the other toys, the other smiling critters, they sold. They sold pretty good. And even Catnap in the beginning, they just wanted a refund once they found out that the gas that Catnap releases gives their children nightmares. Which is also weird. I wouldn't buy my child a toy that releases gas. That has nothing to do with how it looks. That doesn't seem like something they need or should have. Especially when the company also says, oh yeah, the gas that Catnap has, don't worry, it just puts your child to sleep. That is not, that is the part I was concerned about. That it is a gas that does something to my child. If it would just be, oh yeah, it sprays perfume, I would be like, yeah, whatever, right? But if it's like, yeah, it sprays gas into your child's face, and then your child falls asleep because of the gas, that's the point where I would be like, you can keep that, I don't need that. If my child has sleeping problems, I go and talk to a doctor. And not spray some random gas I don't know what it's made from in their face.
92, the game station is in its heyday. Everything is working as planned. But one person is still causing problems. Elliot Ludwig had put a picture up in his office that one of the kids had given him of the game station and Mummy Longlegs. But when he sat there and looked at it, those decisions that had led to this point, they began to weigh heavy on his shoulders. He still felt that Harley's pursuit of innovation...
That one child just made this man realize what he has been doing all these years of torturing and experimenting on children, and then he gets one picture from a child and went, oh damn, what have I been doing to these children? I have to go. Have a nice day or night. Yeah, you too. Have a nice rest of your day, or sleep if you are going to bed. See you next time, maybe.
For the sake of it wasn't right, but the rest of the senior team seemed to be all for him, and it was hard to deny that the company was seeing success. Regardless, he knew he needed to put some kind of safety measure in place, something to keep Harley in check, just in case his worst fears came true. So he promoted one of...
It's okay, I went through the whole story just like, how did they afford any of this? Right, I think it's because the beginning they made a lot of money. When they released toys that were actually successful, and then they started the whole experimentation thing. So, and they still sold toys, I think, in the meantime. They just started to sell toys that had children parts in them, which made them come alive, which probably made them sell even better. So, I don't know. I think there are a lot of evil companies in the real world that still make money somehow. So... it's not that far-fetched that they have the money for that. But there are a lot of steps in the story where I have thought, and the public just accepted that. They built an orphanage underground, and the public said, yeah, that seems fine. That seems okay. Then they came out with a toy that gave children nightmares and put shot gas in their face, and they said, I mean that was a weird move, and they did protest that, but the company existed afterwards, so the public just forgot about that. Yeah, but since when do toys afford high-tech biolabs and prisons and underground orphanages and an ad? Yeah, that's also what I asked. I mean, the orphanage was like an on-site thing that they disguised as we just want to help children, and this was not part of the toy-making process. At least to the public, it wasn't. But when after they, at least according to the theory we are watching right now, after they after the catnap incident where they had to refund all the catnap toys because the children got nightmares, they went out and got a lot of scientists in, and one of them was Harley Sawyer, and I was like, why would they need a physician in a child company? You know, I can understand that they say, okay, we want some scientists so that they can test our toys that for some reason have to shoot gas at children, because that is kind of a thing that they do apparently in this world. But why hire a surgeon for that? A surgeon is not the person you need for that job. I need to get into the toy business, right? It seems lucrative. And because you are doing something for children, apparently people forgive a lot of mistakes you make along the way.
The fellow scientist and Young Geniuses graduate, Dr. Bruno White, to become Harley's superior. Once Harley found out, he could think of this as nothing more than another betrayal from Elliot. And this time, he'd had enough. Elliot was too soft to keep things moving forward. He needed to be got rid of, just like every other problem employee they'd faced. One day, both the staff and the public were informed that Elliot Ludwig had passed away. But Harley Sawyer was the only one who knew the truth about what happened. Thanks to Dr.
Okay, this is where this theory was made before Chapter 4 came out, so they don't know what happened in Chapter 4. This is why I think this is wrong. I think Elliot Ludwig got turned into the prototype, so at this point he has been dead for a very long time to the public. Because at the end he talks to Poppy and says what we are can't be burned away, which to me says they are family, which means Poppy is the daughter and the prototype would be Elliot Ludwig. But when they made this theory, Chapter 4 wasn't out, so they can't know that. Which is why I think this part is wrong. I think Elliot Ludwig died a lot earlier than that and got turned into the prototype.
To White's promotion, Harley's involvement in things slowly became less and less, leading Harley to become more and more frustrated and driving him more and
Poppy seems to not know that, given she asks how much he knew. Yeah, I don't think that Poppy knows that, but from the dialogue, I think it is very clear that that is what the prototype was talking about. But I don't think Poppy knows that. Poppy probably, I don't even know if Poppy knows that that Elliot Ludwig was her father. Maybe she knows that, but I don't know if she even knows that much. But I can see that she knows that, but she maybe just thinks that Elliot Ludwig died and that she doesn't know that he is the prototype.
and more insane, until one day he decided to take matters into his own hands. During a guided tour of the factory in 1993, fires break out in the theatre, causing casualties all across the facility. Obviously, Leith Pierre is furious. Now he has to clean up the mess, taking care of any potential witnesses. This is not the kind of publicity Playtime needed. He brings back their private investigator Jared to figure out who is to blame, and true to his word, he gets them an answer.
Dr. Harley Sawyer.
After spouting rhetoric about one bad day and being betrayed by Elliot all of those years ago, Harley had finally gone full Joker and set the theatre ablaze, baptizing everyone in the...
I mean, I burned just a few people. I just had a bad day, guys. Come on. I'm sure you guys understand. I'm sure you would do the same if you had a day that was as bad as mine was. I think what I'm most curious about is who our person is supposed to be. That's something I'm not sure, but I think it would be interesting if we are Rich. Because Rich is, if you remember, that's we find multiple tapes. In each game, we find a tape about this guy named Rich, who had some anger issues and who was from the beginning at odds with the company and always would go against them, and in the beginning would get demoted a lot of the times because of that. And then he gets a bit calmer and and he becomes the head of shipment. And that is the tape we find in chapter 4, where he's talking to another employee and tells him, hey, I'm here for you. I know this company is not great, but we are a family here in shipment and we work together. And it seems like he knows what the company's up to, but doesn't have the means to stop them currently. And I think it would be interesting if we are Rich, because that is a character that we have been following since the first chapter, but who clearly is not involved in the evil part of the company, who was just an employee who didn't know about all of this stuff. So it would be interesting if it turns out that we are Rich, because I don't see why we would else follow his story through all these chapters. In this theory by Game Theory, they said that Rich became the prototype, which I don't think is the case, but they didn't have the knowledge from chapter 4, so they don't know about that last dialogue between Poppy and the prototype. But I think, because they also came to the conclusion that Rich found out what the company is doing and wanted to stop them. And in my opinion, he left right before the Hour of Joy because of the stuff that he learned. And then the Hour of Joy happened, all of these people died, and we are Rich, who now comes back with a guilty conscience to make things right and maybe try to save the orphans that are still there. I think that would be interesting, because we have gotten these snippets of Rich, where he was in this company, and we got his story where he was demoted, promoted, where he was working, and stuff like that. So I would think it's interesting if we are Rich, because I don't see where his story would lead else. I mean, it could just turn out that he died in the Hour of Joy, and that is all we learn about him in the end, that he's dead. But that is my theory, at least.
Flames that he was working so hard to save them all from with his bigger body's initiative. As Leith had suggested, Harley needed to be punished, but he can't justify the usual methods. Harley is an undeniable genius, and it would be a shame to lose such a brilliant mind when they definitely still needed him. The bigger bodies, while alive, were temperamental and hard to control. They needed to keep perfecting the process. This also meant turning Harley into a bigger body wasn't an option either, as he too would likely lose his mind. And that was when it hit them.
Even if he wouldn't, giving him that powerful of a body, probably not a good idea. Making this guy hate you even more and giving him a bigger body doesn't seem like a good idea. I mean, we know it also wasn't a good idea what they are about to do to him, to turn him into, to connect him to the system of the factory was also not a good idea, because he got control over it. But I think he only got control over it during the Hour of Joy, when the prison guard guy gave him the Omni hand. That is when he actually got control over the factory. Before that, I don't think he had control. He was just there and could talk, but nothing else.
Of turning Harley into a bigger body, why not turn Harley into a digital consciousness? They could focus all their attention on keeping his mind alive without the need for a working body. That way, Harley could still help them and guide the scientific process, but he couldn't physically cause any problems. It was perfect. By 1994, this plan is...
I mean, it's only perfect if you think that he would actually help you. I mean, after you do that to him, it's also very likely that he's just going to sabotage you. And because he is so smart that you don't know that, that he's just tricking you the entire time. So, risky move.
is underway. The party line is that Harley is just out, maybe on a sabbatical or something. And in 1995, the new Playtime automated companion is up and running, ready to meet with scientists like PW. The system would end up being shut down after May of that year, but regardless, it was another success.
I don't think he just meets with PW. PW is Dr. White. I think Dr. White is the one who puts him into the computer, because they had their dialogue we found on tape.
For Playtime Co. However, as we've seen time and time again, pride cometh before the fall. And this next fall would be the biggest Playtime had ever seen. Behind the scenes, while Playtime Co. had been dealing with Harley, 1006 had been plotting. They'd been gathering all the toys together and promising them the thing they all wanted, freedom. They formulated a plan to take back the factory from Playtime and kill all those who'd helped turn them into monsters. They called it the Hour of Joy, and on August 8th, 1995, they executed that plan. They attack everyone, scientists, tour guides, construction workers, it didn't matter. They were all responsible. They all needed to die. The toys drag the bodies into the depths and slowly...
What a bad day to visit the factory, you know? Imagine you are just a random tourist who's just there to visit the factory, and you do it exactly on that day. That's just bad luck.
Consume them to satiate their hunger. Only a small...
Although, we have not found any civilian bodies underground. You know, all the dead people we found had the factory uniform. So they were all people who worked there. So maybe the actual visitors weren't killed, but they were dragged underground, and they maybe are still alive together with the orphans that we are there for. Although I can see that the twist at the end of the game is that the orphans are all dead, and that the prototype has just been lying to us so that we come down there and help him escape. And there are no orphans anymore, and they are all dead, and that it was just a trick to get us to come there.
Few managed to escape the carnage, Leith Pierre being one of them. Despite the insane loss the company was facing, he kept insisting Playtime Co. continue their work. He began recruitment efforts for a resource extraction team, people that would go back into Playtime Co. and collect the parts they needed to keep making bigger bodies.
Okay, that's probably one of the offshoot games that I didn't know about. Okay, so Leith Pierre is apparently confirmed to still be alive. I thought he was dead. I thought he died during the Hour of Joy, but apparently he's still alive. And apparently they still send people in there to gather stuff, and they continue, because the Hour of Joy wasn't like a wake-up call to them that is not a good idea what they were doing. But sure, continue.
But eventually, the rising pressure from the public over the mysterious disappearance of the staff, their friends and family, was too much for even Leith to handle, and he shut down the factory for good.
Okay.
Nearly a decade passed, and the Playtime Co. factory, as well as all that happened there, had largely been forgotten. The world had simply moved on. But in 2002, deep in the...
That is crazy. that after everything that happened, that people would just forget about that. You know, after the catnap toy, I think before the catnap toy, it was just a normal toy factory that didn't really have a lot of image problems. I think there were some things here and there that people thought were weird, but it started with the catnap toy. That was their first big scandal. Then they hire a surgeon and a lot of other scientists, instead of saying, hey, we are not going to experiment with weird drugs anymore to give to your children. No, they hired scientists so that they could continue to do that. And then suddenly a bunch of people that went there, doesn't matter if they were people who worked there or people who just visited the factory, one day no one leaves this factory and they all just vanish from the earth. And after that, people still get hired by the company, but every time they do, they also just vanish. And people just forget about that in 10 years. I think that would be one of those things that people would bring up all the time if that would happen in real life. That is one of these things that people would just talk every time something about a company or toys comes up. You know, I think that people wouldn't just forget about it in a decade.
Bowels of the factory, something or someone was coming back online. Harley had awoken from his mysterious slumber. Ironically, just as he'd always stated, his conversion had actually saved him from death.
So he was shut down. I didn't see the trailer or wherever that voice line comes from. So apparently he was shut down after the Hour of Joy. So I think the prototype probably turned him back on because they were working together in chapter 4. At least it seemed like they were working together. I think one of the characters also says they are working together.
Like his former colleagues, he realized the opportunity.
Which would be interesting if the prototype is actually Elliot Ludwig, that they would end up working together after all of that. That would be interesting, at least.
He had. There was no one left to stop him. His plans could continue. He could save the rest of humanity from their mortal coil and convert them all into living, eternal toys. So he began hacking into the rest of Playtime Co.'s systems, taking control of all communications that were coming in and out of the factory.
Okay.
His plan would come to fruition. At the same time, the bigger bodies also...
That would be a wild world where every person is just a toy. I mean, not only because the toys, a lot of them just are wild monsters and don't really have any real sentience anymore, but also just how would society work if everyone is just a big toy monster? That would be at least interesting. I would like to see how that society works.
Remained in the factory, waiting for the prototype to save them as promised, but food supplies were running short. Some of them began to lose their faith that salvation would ever come.
Dog Day.
Dog Day was one such toy, and 1006 quickly made an example of him. This type of threat, however, wouldn't work forever, and 1006 knew that. It needed to make progress. It was still trying to create its perfect body, but it just didn't have the know-how. Rich was...
You have seen some parts of it. We know that Catnap built this weird shrine that is supposed to look like the prototype, which I thought was interesting because in the front of the prototype was a human head and I think torso that was sticking out of it, at least the one that Catnap built. And we also know that from the pictures we have seen of the prototype's hand that there are human bones in his body. So I'm really interested to see what the prototype looks like.
Just a simple construction worker. Sure, he could do some cool things with tech, but biology was a whole other ballgame.
All right, they still think
so
that
in 2005, it writes a note.
They still think that Rich is the prototype,
saying that the employees that went missing were actually still in the factory, waiting to be rescued. And it sends it to the only person that's not only around to hear it, but would actually care enough to make the trip. The player character, PW. PW didn't show up for work on August 8th, 1995. They were still alive, and more importantly, they actually cared about their fellow employees. If there was a chance their colleagues were still around, they needed to help them. Now, as a
PW is, I believe, Dr. White, and I think this is where they are very wrong, because we know that Dr. White is the one who put Sawyer into the computer system and became the head surgeon, doctor, whatever, after him. So I don't think that that part is right. Like I said, I think that we are Rich and that the prototype is Elliot Ludwig, and that the prototype maybe tricked us with this note to come there and help him escape. Because so far, even though we think we are fighting against the prototype, every chapter ends with us actually helping him. Right, in chapter 1, we free Poppy, which he needed for his plan, because Poppy later also helps him. Then we killed Mummy Longlegs, which he grabbed her, and because he needed parts from her. Then we helped kill Catnap, and he also grabbed parts from him. And we also, in chapter 3, we rerouted the red gas down to the orphanage. And then we helped him blow up Safe Haven and kill Dowie, because Dowie is probably a real threat to the prototype, because Dowie is very powerful. Probably the most powerful toy we have seen so far. And we helped him to get rid of all the other toys that were still there, and to basically destroy Poppy's base of support that she had. And now, as far as we know, the only alive things we know of is Kissy Missy, who is had a pretty rough time throughout the games. Poppy is running around somewhere. The prototype is still alive, and Huggy Wuggy. Those are the only 4 characters that we are guaranteed that they are still around. Well, we don't know. Maybe Kissy died. I don't think so. I think she will be alive, and I think she will also be important in Chapter 5. Maybe she will sacrifice herself at the end to save us, as she has done a lot in these games. But yeah, my current thing is I don't think that there are any orphans left. I think it was a trick from the prototype to get out of there, because everything we did so far was only beneficial for him, and he just needed someone who would do all of that stuff. Maybe also get rid of the doctor for him because he couldn't do it, so we had to do that. So I think the prototype is just tricking us and trying to escape, and we have to kill him at the end, and then maybe we die and no one in this factory comes out alive. And that's just where it ends, that everything that happens here is dead and forgotten. Which would be a sad ending, but I don't put it past the game to do that. That the game doesn't end with a happy end, but ends with everything being destroyed and maybe the whole laboratory burning down, so that all the evidence of this stuff is gone.
They knew their way around the factory. They knew where this flower was that they'd been pointed to. Mm-hmm. They just had to get there, while also trying to avoid an unpleasant...
Right, what we know is that our character is an employee. Not only because we know our way around, but also because other characters recognized us. Which also means we were rather important in the factory. That a lot of the people recognize us, because Mommy recognized us, and the doctor didn't recognize us, I think, which would make sense when we are Rich, because Rich worked in shipment, and I don't think that the doctor cared for shipment very much. I don't think that was part of the company that he was very familiar with.
Reunion with one of the many bigger bodies they'd helped create, Huggy Wuggy. PW finds Poppy behind the flower, in the same room she always was. Although there are now messages around the room warning them not to trust her. Regardless, once they open the case, Poppy agrees to help PW escape. See, she's not that bad at all. Only Mummy then shows up and kidnaps Poppy. After beating all of Mummy's games, PW returns to Poppy and takes her to the train. Only for Poppy
Poppy's just switching sides every time. At the end of the first chapter, she seems evil. At the beginning of the second, she's good. At the end of the second, she seems evil. At the beginning of the third, she's good. At the end of the third chapter, she doesn't seem evil. She seems like she's still working with us. And even at the end of the chapter, it still seems to be the case. But then in chapter 4, at the beginning, she's on our side. In the end, she leaves us to die. On that end, did you see they may be doing an amusement parks side game? Yeah, I think I'm here for this game world. If the story ends with chapter 5, I'm here for side games that explore the world a bit more and other maybe facilities of this company, because it is a very big company. It was one of the biggest toy companies in the world. I don't think that they just had one factory. That doesn't make sense. So maybe there are other facilities that we maybe explore in some side games. That would make sense. They mentioned in chapter 3, but yeah, there's a good chance it becomes its own side game. Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, there is already one side game apparently, where you go back into the factory to collect stuff for Leaf Pierre. So I can see them making, because Poppy Playtime is such a big franchise that I don't think that they just drop chapter 5, the story ends, and then they say, good, that's it, we are never going to touch that franchise ever again. I can see them making some side games where they explore other maybe facilities from this company or other ideas, like an amusement park maybe. That I can see that. That would be cool. I'm here for that. If they are just shorter games you can that they do, I don't think they are going to do a new like complete storyline like that has multiple chapters. I don't think that they are going to do that, but I can see them making some side games where they explore some ideas they had but couldn't fit into this game.
Change her mind and stop PW from leaving.
I'm sorry, I can't let you leave.
They really should have trusted the signs. The train crashes in front of the playcare, and with some surprising help from Poppy, Kissy Missy, and their ally Ollie, who may or may not be the prototype.
Okay, we know by now that he's the prototype. They didn't know that. Someone in last stream had the theory that maybe we, the character we play, is a toy that escaped and now came back. Because we survive stuff like the train crash and it seems to do no damage to us. So that would make sense that maybe we are a toy. But also, from the reaction of characters, I don't think that's the case because the Doctor and Mommy both recognized us as employees. So we have to look human. So I don't think that would be true. But it was still an interesting idea. But we have to look human from the way other people, other characters reacted to us. And I think the issue with that is everyone calls us a human. Yeah, right. Because the teacher, when she sees us, calls us an employee, and that she wouldn't do that if we look like a toy. And also Mommy recognizes us as an employee, which I thought was a bit weird, was that in the beginning of chapter 4, when the Doctor talks to us for the first time, he says, if I remember correctly, he says that he recognizes us, because when the camera turns on, he says, "Oh, it's you," which sounds like he knows who we are, but later when he talks to us, he says he has no idea who we are. That was a bit confusing in my opinion. Maybe he was just, "Oh, you are the human that has been walking around upstairs that I heard from the prototype about," or something like that. Maybe it was just, "Oh, you made it down here. Wow." And not, "Oh, I know who you are." Yeah, the fall in chapter 4, Force End should have killed us. So that is weird. Yeah, we tank a lot of the falls we do. Also the train crash, you know. In the beginning I was like, okay, at the end of chapter 2, the train just falls over, and I was like, okay, that is survivable. I don't see a problem with that. But then when we see in chapter 3 how the train looks, and everything was burning, and the entire train cabin was crushed, that was where I was like, and we survived that without we don't have a broken leg or something like that? We are just fine and walking around? Okay. So I don't know, maybe we were an employee and we have been enhanced by these experiments, but we still look human. But in that case, I think the Doctor would have recognized us. I think an experiment like that, where they enhance a human without turning him into a toy, I think the Doctor would remember that. So I don't think that theory makes too much sense, because there's too much that goes against it.
Mimicking a child's voice to trick us, PW makes their way through the Playcare. Together, they defeat Catnap and begin the long trip down into Playtime's prison. But Kissy doesn't make the trip. She is killed by something on their way down. And
she's not killed, she survives. She was completely fine when we meet her the first time, but then at the end of the chapter, she gets attacked by, I think, probably the prototype. And when we see her the next time, she has a broken arm, she's limping, her face has been burned, the fur on her face. She has scars all over her body. At the end of chapter 4, her arm rips off. So Kissy has just been taking a beating since she met us. Which I think, which would make sense to finish her story, is that in chapter 5, she actually sacrifices her life to save us at one point. Because so far, each chapter since her introduction ends with her sacrificing her health for us. So it would make sense that at the end she dies when she helps us. And I don't think she died. I don't think that they would just let her die at the end of chapter 4. That would be a very unsatisfying death for her, I feel like. Dory had a point, it's all our fault. Yeah. I mean, we, from the beginning, I think we have been working into the hands of the prototype, and we were an employee before, so we have a lot of fault here. A lot of this has been because of us.
All of this time, Harley has been watching through the security cameras, making his way down to the prison just a bit ahead of them to reunite with Yarnaby and lay whatever traps he has in store for us down in the depths, along with the nightmare critters, Pianosaurus, and a toy made from
nightmare critter? Okay, I didn't knew the nightmare critters existed. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe we will see them next chapter. But yeah, Pianosaurus was apparently he was teased already. But he was not an opponent we had to fight. We met him and he just died immediately. Which was weird, because I was already thinking, when he was introduced in the game, I was already thinking about, a sound-based character that we maybe have to listen where the music is coming from. And maybe we are in a room where different types of music play, but we have to hear which one comes from him and which one is safe to go to. But no, he just died immediately. Dory just wrecked him immediately. Which I think is kind of sad, because I think he would have been an interesting character. Yeah, people were very disappointed in that. Yeah, I was looking forward to him, because I think like a sound-based enemy in a horror game is very cool. Especially because his teeth, the piano keys, were glowing, which would look so cool when he's haunting you in the dark. But no, Dowie took that away. He just beat him to death. Which maybe if they are planning on making some offshoot games, maybe there will be a game where we play someone during the Hour of Joy. Maybe there will be a offshoot game where we play someone who survived the Hour of Joy and we have to run through the factory and try to escape. And maybe we will face him there. That would be cool, to give him what he deserved. But yeah. But if they already teased him in trailers and stuff, that would be extra disappointing if he then just dies. I mean, I feel like some parts of the game were rushed in general. I, for example, was disappointed in the Doctor. I think the Doctor boss fight could have been a lot better. I think that you could tell that one was a bit rushed and that they didn't really have a plan for him, what his boss fight would be. Because the Yarnaby boss fight was very cool. The Yarnaby boss fight was really fun. But the Doctor boss fight was a bit eh. Which I still hope that the Doctor isn't dead, because the Doctor just gave up. He was just like, oh yeah, come in, and then we killed him, and he was like, oh, you don't know what you have done. And then he's dead. And that felt... I don't feel like the Doctor doesn't feel like someone who would just give up like that. You know? So I think maybe because we took his computer chip and used it to get the Omni Hand, I could see that maybe through that, that the Doctor is now like in our Omni Hand currently, his digital consciousness, and that he will return in chapter 5. At least I hope that is the case, because it was a bit disappointing. If you played it early, Yarnaby was mostly broken. Yeah, I heard about that. I heard that that some people he didn't spawn at all during their fight. Which I had some bugs with him, but not like anything that ruined the experience. I had one time where he glitched himself into one of the hideouts, where there were these corners you could squeeze in to hide, and one time he glitched himself in there somehow. And one time he just stood before me and fell over to the side because he was standing on a corner, apparently, and just his whole model was tilting to the side, which just looked funny but didn't ruin the fight. But I heard that he was apparently, a lot of people didn't even fight him, actually. they could just run around in that area and reroute the electricity without a problem. Which is probably also the case because the chapter was a bit rushed. But yeah, I hope at least that for chapter 5 they now take their time and make sure that everything works when it comes out, because chapter 5 is probably the finale of the series, and if that is broken at any point, especially during a boss fight, when the boss fight against the prototype is broken or something like that, that would be really bad. So I hope they take their time for this chapter. Because I'm looking forward to the next chapter. I want to fight the new and damaged Huggy Wuggy, because he looks even more terrifying, which I was not aware was possible. And we are going to fight the prototype, which also will be pretty cool. I'm interested if they introduce another enemy before the end, or if those are the two enemies in that chapter and we only have to fight them, or if they actually introduce someone new. Maybe we see the nightmare critters there, because these characters apparently exist and I have never seen them. So maybe they become relevant in chapter 5.
Doughy the Dough Man. And that, loyal theorists, is the entire timeline of Poppy Playtime so far.
Okay, we could have... I paused exactly before the end.
Boy, this franchise is getting big. This is probably the last time I'll be able to do an entire timeline in...
We see the two nightmare critters in chapter 4. Really? Oh, right. They, now I remember, when the doctor talks to us, the sheep and the dragon looking one. Yeah, right. And when when the doctor talks to us, there's one point very early in the game where we just get attacked by a bunch of small toys and have to close the prison doors so that they can't come out. I think that is where the nightmare critters run around, because I remember that there was a black yellow lizard toy, and that is one of the nightmare critters. So no, they were part of chapter 4. Okay. I have seen them, but they were not as relevant as the smiling critters were, so I didn't really think about them. But yeah, they were there. They were just these small enemies that would swarm us, but they didn't really have a bigger story part.
One video. I mean, look at that runtime. No, I have to say, it is refreshing that outside of a...
I mean, look at that runtime. We have been watching this video for 2 hours, so we stretched out the runtime a bit more. Yeah, they kind of come out of nowhere. Yeah, I don't think they need much more than that. I don't think they need a lot of story to them, because they were just these small enemies that we had to fight for a while. But I didn't... That's the case. I didn't really notice what they were. So much so that I didn't recognize them when I had pictures of them in this video. But yeah, they don't seem relevant. So we won't see them in chapter 5. I don't think so. So it's probably just the new Huggy and the prototype. Because I don't think... Would they introduce another character right before the finale? I think that's why they bring Huggy back, so they don't have to introduce a new character in the finale. So that we fight the mascot of the game and the big bad of the game. And that is the finale. Pierre as the real villain somehow. I mean, Pierre, at least in their theory here in this video, they said that Pierre escaped because there's an offshoot game where you go back into the factory collecting parts, and apparently the person who sends you there is Pierre. So Pierre escaped. He's not in the factory anymore. He probably got to escape and live a happy life after all of that, which he doesn't deserve, but apparently that's what he got.
Few bits of connective tissue. Most of what we've talked about today are either things Mob has told us directly, or we have a lot of evidence to support. The only real details that are super speculative are things like when the Young Geniuses program started, or why Elliot agreed to start using children in the experiments. We said that the Young Geniuses program started in...
That is my theory. I don't think he ever agreed to that, and that is the reason why they turned him into the prototype. That he refused to give the okay for that, and that they needed to get rid of him. So they turned him into the prototype so he wouldn't be in their way. And then they've planted some dead child in his house so that they would ruin his reputation and people wouldn't look more into his death. Because people now hate him. Because they think he murdered a child. That's what I think. Although when they made this video, again, Chapter 4 wasn't out yet, so they don't know that Poppy and the prototype had this talk at the end of Chapter 4.
In the 60s, but it could very well be the 50s based on the logo. Maybe they were even the ones that helped make the first Poppy dolls. But so long as Harley joins the company early, leaves, and then comes back to cause a bunch of problems, it doesn't really matter which decade it takes place. The same thing goes for Elliot's change of heart towards the orphans. We've got no evidence saying why he made the decisions he did. We may discover his reasoning in the future. It's just not going to change the order of events because we have set dates of when things have to happen. But there you have it, friends. Everything you could possibly need to know going into Chapter 4. And I don't know about you, but now I'm even more excited to see where all this goes. Who will our allies be? What is Harley's big plan? Will I have to rethink the identity of the prototype for a third time? I'm sure.
Yes, you do.
Or all will be revealed in a few weeks. In the meantime, remember, that's just a theory. A game theory!
Game theory, yeah. This is also the first game theory video that I have watched since MadPat is gone. It took me a bit by surprise in the beginning that it was not him talking. But yeah, that's a lot of the stuff they talked about is stuff that I also thought were the case. That a lot of these things were stuff that we talked about after we finished Chapter 4. A lot of the things they theorized obviously weren't right because they didn't have the knowledge of Chapter 4. But there were some things in here that I didn't know that were very helpful to get a bigger picture of the story. I still think, so my current headcanon for what will be revealed in Chapter 5 is that they will actually confirm that the prototype is Elliot Ludwig and that he is the father of Poppy, and Poppy is his daughter who died and then got reincarnated into the doll. I think they will reveal that like really and say it word by word and not just hint at it. What else? I think we will learn who our character is. I still think it would be the character I think would make the most sense is Rich still, because there has to be a reason why we learn his story, why we find tapes about him, why he's so important to all of this, even though he has not done anything important in the tapes. So there has to be a reason why we learn his story. So I think that we are Rich. That is still my theory. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you won't miss any of my next videos. Or if you want to experience this live in the future, follow me on my Twitch. Until then, bye bye!